All right, welcome to the live stream. Israel Kimmin here from Apologetic Arena, and today we are going to be engaging with the belief, or the lack of belief, as they say, of atheism, the belief that there is no God. This is going to be a very simple but very effective live stream today. I'm going to walk through a couple of things. I'm going to walk through this. You can see this image right here. I'll explain that all in a moment. And we're going to look at this particular movie right here. And we're going to talk about a couple of other things in today's live stream, all which highlight the big problem with atheism, the belief that there is no God, believing that there is no God. All right. And from a Christian perspective, it's helpful for us because we understand that the more we can prove and see that believing that there is no God is not a reasonable, not the most rational way to think or to believe, the easier it is to help us as Christians to believe in the God of the Bible, etc. So, welcome to the Sunday roast, as I like to call it. Sundays here in the UK, we like to engage with different arguments against Christianity, and we look at atheism, we look at arguments from rabbinic Judaism against Christianity, we look at Islam's attacks against Christianity and Hebrew Israelites specifically. But today's an interesting one because we're not looking at the arguments or the beliefs from a different religious group or a group who has a set book or set laws or codices to compare or to contrast, or coming from that sort of perspective against Christianity. And that in and of itself highlights the very problem. Now, we're going to go back in time. We're going to go back to the past in a couple of ways. I'll explain that all in a moment, but it's actually funny. Before I do this, it's a shame that I can't show both messages, but probably 5-10 minutes before I was actually scheduled to go live, someone decided to put a comment in the live chat. And it was interesting because it's not, give me 2 seconds. It didn't come through for some reason, so I can't show it in the live chat or on the live on screen. But the person was basically, I can only show the second part, which says this, right? It says from Brabble Beast, he says, and they have been doing so for decades. This is the only message I saw, and I wondered, like, what on earth was this person talking about? I don't know what position he's coming from or her, but on YouTube it was showing. The person was basically saying in the other message, which didn't show up, and I doubt it's going to come up in the replay in the live chat because it was before the live actually even started. But the person was basically saying, why is it always Christians or theists, people who believe in God, who have been saying that atheism is destroyed, it's defeated, it's debunked, etc. for decades, and they're still doing it now? And as I was reading this, I was thinking to myself, I had a little chuckle, and I said, well, imagine who is going to say that atheism is debunked? Is an atheist going to say, someone who doesn't believe in God, that the belief in no God is actually silly or debunked? What would happen to an atheist at that point? At the point an atheist comes to that realization and is willing to publicly acknowledge that atheism doesn't make any sense, atheism is destroyed, debunked, foul, etc., they would immediately now be moving closer to theism. They may not be at the stage at that point where they believe in God, but they will now be called they will now be coming from the perspective of what we call agnosticism. They now are not sure. They believe there's something out there, but they don't know what it is or who it is, etc. We can even flip this in the other direction, right? What Christian would say Christianity is debunked? What Muslim would say Islam was debunked? The moment you say those things, you're no longer in those belief systems anymore, etc. You're moving out of that place, out of that location. So it was funny. It was funny to hear that. But there we go. Some comedy gold before the live stream even started. All right, let me do some house cleaning just for the record, right? As is the custom, on the Sunday roast, we are willing and welcoming people to call into the live stream and engage with the topic of the live stream. So today I welcome atheists to come on and deal with the major problem we're going to discuss. Christians can come on, people can come on basically and add to the conversation we're going to be discussing today. That's number one. I'm going to post that link in a moment. Let me do a couple of things. All right, okay. That's done. Let me find the chat and I'll post this. Okay, cool. So this is the link. Live. All right. Let's do this. Let's see if hopefully, let's see, is that pinned? That should be pinned to the top of the chat now. All right, cool. So that's that. Secondly, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to say this because the topic we're going to be talking about today can get a bit interesting. I'll just put it like this. So definitely, the reason I'm going to say I'm not going to be surprised if this live stream is shadow banned, if it's not being pushed out and all these different kind of things. Help push this out, help avoid any sort of restrictions being put on this live stream. So share this with friends, hit the like button, etc. Get more people onto the live stream so we can counteract any suspicious behavior. I'll just put it like that. All right, cool. Let me do this. It's not pinned yet. I want to pin this. All right, and thanks as well for those of you who are already tuning in and engaging with the live chat. I'll shout some of you out in a second. Give me 2 seconds. All right. It's live, guys. It happens. All right. Just trying to make sure everything is in. All right, cool. I think we're sorted. All right, cool. So let's see who we got here so far. All right, and this is welcome to the live stream, son of David. All right, okay. Oh wow, the message actually did come. So let me go back, right? Because I talked about this already, but somehow it came. It's showing now. So this is what I saw right a moment ago, and then I'll get back to some of the meet and greets. Right, this was from Rabble Beast, and I already explained it, but it says, for some funny reason, it's always theists, those who believe in God, that declare atheism is debunked, it's dead, it's destroyed, it's over, etc. And then we talked about the other comment. Let me just go back and find it, which was the second message, which is, and they have been doing so for decades. And obviously just went through that whole example, thought process of, well, if an atheist comes to that conclusion, they're not going to be an atheist anymore, are they? So who else is going to be saying and showing why atheism isn't viable, doesn't make sense in the bigger scheme of things? Son of David, thanks for tuning in. Hi to you too. God bless. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for tuning into the live stream. Let's see some of these comments, because some of these comments I already see are interesting. All right. Cool. Let me do this. All right. Cool. Ecosmos, thanks as always for your support as a moderator. I appreciate you. All right. And this is, we're getting into it really, really and truly, right? The enemy, the adversary, the serpent, the devil, right, has made himself too obvious. And it's interesting because when that happens, you normally see very interesting things happen. You see a lot of people, like I'm already seeing some of the comments coming in already. What happens? Let's do this. Okay, cool. Look at this. Son of David says, more people are coming to the faith, not through the good they see in the world, but the evil. And I agree for the most part. Many people today are seeing a lot of very suspect, very crazy behavior. And that is opening their eyes. That is allowing them to see, wait, hold on. But think about this. The more and more evil that is being shown to people, the more and more evil people are seeing and acknowledging, that only makes sense. Think about this. Seeing all this evil only makes sense if there's something good. And this is, you've taken me into today's topic already, son of David, right? Before I was even planning to go there. But all the evil that people are seeing today, think about some of the crazy stuff that's been happening over the last few years. Think about the crazy stuff that's been happening in recent weeks, in recent days. Think about stuff that probably even happened today where people are scratching their head wondering, how is this going on? People have these feelings deep down in their heart and they're wondering, and in their minds like, no, this is crazy. How can this stuff be going on? And the more and more they do that, the more and more they realize, wait, hold on. This is only evil. This is only bad if there's an alternative. This is only evil. This is only bad if there is an alternative. And when you think about the alternative, what is the alternative? The alternative to evil is good, right? Now, this gets into the first picture I showed you earlier. I'll bring this back up again. I was just drawing a little bit on my whiteboard and I'm going to explain this. But the main thing I'm going to highlight when I talk about this is this right here, right? This green line that I drew, this green circle that I drew, right? That you can see there. This is the problem. Or no, sorry. This is the difference. And this green line here highlights the problem with atheism. That is the problem. And it's what I've already began talking about based on some of the comments that have already come into the live stream, right? All this evil is happening in the world. And it's not because there's any more evil necessarily than there's been in past times. But what is different today and continues to be different and showcases all of this stuff even more is the way in which we live in a day where there's so much technology which can transmit, which can send all this evil stuff around rapidly, like that. That is the problem. So things are happening in these different parts of the world and people are seeing it because people are recording it on phones and tablets and even professional cameras, and they're broadcasting it and showing it, right? So people all around the world can see not only the evil that's happening with their own eyes in front of them in real life, in real time, they're seeing the same sorts of evil and even more evil in a different place. And that is a problem. The more and more people see this, the more and more people realize, wait, hold on, things are really dark. And the more you realize there's darkness, the easier it is to realize there is light. You see, when you think about the big problem with atheism, if you think about the thumbnail, right, the image that goes with this live stream, the image that people are going to see where it says atheism is false, and it's got a picture of Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and Daniel, is it Daniel Dennett? No, it's not Daniel Dennett, and Stephen Hitchens, right? Christopher Hitchens, sorry, not Stephen Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens. Those were 3 of the 4, what we were calling in recent years, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the atheist horsemen. Now, that in and of itself is ironic. And even when I think about it today, in my daily devotion, my daily Bible reading, I'm actually reading through Revelation right now. And it was actually this morning, right? And you can't make this up. It was actually this morning. I'm reading about the 4 horsemen in Revelation and all the destruction they're leaving behind as they're coming to earth, etc. And the reason, and these leaders of what we call the new atheist movement, one of the things they did, which got them a lot of publicity, and they did People like Richard Dawkins, Dr. Dawkins still does it today, blasting away at the morality of the Bible. How could the Bible say this? And how could the Bible say that? And how could God do this or allow this X, Y, Z, right? We've all probably heard some shape or form or fashion of those sorts of arguments. And they got popular, very popular. Entering into the 2000s, going into 2010 and etc. This was the new atheist movement. This new movement which was confidently, boldly and charismatically wiping out Christianity and religion as a whole. This was the mandate. This was the mission. And many atheists, I was going to say many atheists came to the faith at that point, as in the atheist faith, but many atheists rose up. But what began to happen, and I've done recent videos on this as well on the channel. I do videos here as well for those of you who don't know. There came a point in time where it just declined. And the new atheist movement didn't continue any sort of upward spiral. It came down. Why? Because of a very big problem. Very, very, very big problem. And it's the same problem which will always come back to bite atheism in its bottom. And this is what I'm depicting in this image that I was drawing earlier. Now, we can look at all the evil that's going on. As early in the Bible as Genesis chapter 2, I was thinking about this a moment ago. In the book, at the beginning of the Bible, we have Genesis, first book in the Bible, and we find out about how God created everything, right? Now in Genesis chapter 2, we get some specific details about how God created Adam, right? The first man. And something very specific God says to Adam, which is really relevant to what we're talking about today. So God says to Adam, look, I'm putting you in this garden. This garden has loads of fruit. There's loads of trees in this garden. Eat of all these fruits, right? There's an abundance of fruits. You can eat of all of them, right? Imagine walking into a supermarket, your local supermarket that you go to or whatever, and the manager stops you at the beginning of the entrance and says, look, Israel, everything in this supermarket you are able to enjoy. It would be like heaven, wouldn't it? And then, but there's only one row, there's only one aisle in this supermarket that you cannot go down. Every other aisle you can go down, and every other aisle you can enjoy anything you like. This is very similar to what God said to Adam. Go into the Garden of Eden, take care of it, etc. Have dominion, eat all the fruit. Everything is to your heart's desire, but don't eat of that specific fruit. This is the first law, the first boundary, commandment that God gives to mankind. Don't eat of that particular fruit. And from that point in the Bible, as Christians, we are being given boundaries. This is why in the next chapter in Genesis chapter 3, it's just like, imagine we walk into that supermarket and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like, wow, like there's a TV in this aisle. I'm going to enjoy that TV. I'm going to take that home. Oh, there's a bunch of fruit here. I can make smoothies for the Sunday roast. Okay, I'm going to take a lot of strawberries. This particular smoothie today I put a lot of apples in it, and yeah, a lot of apples. It was very fruity, right? Very Garden of Eden-esque. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to stock up. And then I see the aisle I'm not supposed to go down, and I say, well, you know what? Let me just start walking. Let me just see what's in there, actually. I start forgetting about all of the abundance in the supermarket that God's given me access to, and I'm going to start looking to see what is it really that God does want me to go and look at. I start seeing, okay, there's this interesting stuff down this aisle. You know what? Let me take something. And I go to the checkout. I've got all of this stuff I've taken, but one little thing from the aisle, and I go to the checkout and I leave the shop and I go home. And as I'm walking out of the shop and I walk into my car, the manager calls me and says, "Hey, Israel, I told you don't go down that aisle. Now you can't come back in here anymore and enjoy all of this good stuff. Why? Because you didn't follow my rule. You did something wrong. This is the big problem with atheism. And this is what I'm depicting in this image right here. In atheism, this is atheism's big problem. I said I'm going to go back, right? We're going to go back in time. So before I even break that down even more, earlier on, right, 3 of my children were acting up, to say the least, right? Anyone who has children and has been a parent for any serious amount of time, you know this is just something that happens, right? So me and my wife, we discipline our children. And because of this live stream, because of a video that is going to come out pretty soon on the channel, because that's all in my mind, I'm thinking, like, as I'm disciplining my children and just telling them off, like, be better, you're better than this, etc., do the right thing, I'm thinking to myself, why does this even matter? Like, my children are doing this stuff and I'm like, look, don't do this. This is wrong. The same thing the manager said to me in the supermarket, don't go down the aisle, it's wrong. The same thing God said to Adam, don't eat of that fruit on that particular tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, don't eat of it, don't do it, it's wrong. I'm thinking about this and I'm like, look, children, like, in my mind, why can I even say this and expect them to listen to me? Why? This was earlier on. Yesterday, funny enough, you'll be surprised how much this actually happens. And the moment you start thinking about this, it'll become even clearer for you. So imagine, you know, when you start thinking about a certain car and then you just start seeing the car all over the road. It's like that, right? Yesterday, for example, I was at a gathering and we were in a conversation. The conversation was very excited and excitable and animated. And one of the people who was in this conversation was like, look, we're talking about biblical stuff, right? We're talking about a topic and etc. So one of the people in the conversation says to someone else in the conversation, not me, oh, look, you know, like, whatever you're saying, cool, right? But we're Christians. Like, we follow what the Bible says. The Bible is our authority. And he now says to him, give me some Bible verses. Show me some verses in the Bible which back up what you're saying. The person didn't do a good job. So much so, you know what the person did? At one point in this conversation, it's very comical. You can't make this up, especially before a stream like this, right? The person turns around and says, after saying, you know what, yeah, like, I'm with the Bible, the person then turned around and said, well, you know what, it doesn't even have to be in the Bible. You know what, if I say it, then it goes. It's basically just a simple way to explain this to you. So what did they do at that point? At that point, they showcased to everybody that was listening there, no, even though you say the Bible is your authority, for me, the Bible really isn't my authority. I'm my authority. I do what I want. And when it serves me to say I follow the Bible, I'll follow the Bible. But when it doesn't, well, I follow me. And the person said, well, it's about the book of, and they mentioned their name. So it's like, imagine if I say, you know, I don't care about the Bible. It's the book of Israel is what matters. That's what the person basically did. It's the same problem that atheism has. We can go back further, right? When you look at an image like this, atheism's big problem, their big problem is, you've got all these people here, right? These are just an example of people, right? All these little dots are people. You've got all these people, but who makes the rules? Who says what's right and what's wrong? Whereas Christianity, for example, you've got all these people, but like I mentioned earlier, this green line here, this green circle, is a representation of God's boundaries, his rules. I gave you an example earlier. when God is saying to Adam, don't eat of that tree. So the moment Adam or Eve ate from that tree, they were breaking the rules. It was wrong. What atheist can do that, can say that about anything? None. What? And this is where you need to be very careful and understand what I'm saying. I am not saying that atheists do not have any sort of morality or cannot have any sort of morality. That's not the argument, and that's not the problem. The big problem with atheism is there's no objective morality. This is why it's interesting. The video I talked about earlier, which is going to come out recently, soon, is about the Olympics. And I'm going to show how God used the Olympics to prove atheism is false. But you can apply this to anything in life. Think about the craziest thing that's happened in the last year. Think about it, right? Think of an example. Some people are going to think about what's been happening in the Middle East. Some people are going to think about, oh, you know what, Israel, give me a bit more space. Let's think about over the last couple of years. Some people are going to think about what's been happening in Ukraine. Some people are going to be thinking about something that happened to them in their personal life. What makes those things evil? What makes those things bad? Objectively. Everybody can have an opinion. I can turn around today and say, no, I'm not going to use me as an example. People turn around today and say what? Oh, today they feel like they're a woman. Tomorrow they say they feel like a man. Okay. Tomorrow, somebody can turn around and say they identify as someone who's a newborn. Tomorrow, someone could say anything. So think back to crazy things, to evil things which have been happening today in this time period, and go back through the past. And this is why, when you think about the atheist attacks on Christianity, for example, the atheist attacks on the Bible, how can this be in the Bible? This is wicked. This is evil. How can any of those things objectively be seen as evil? How can any of those things be seen as bad, objectively? This is why the book maybe I'll bring it up later, but the problem is clear to see for anybody who wants to think about this for longer than a couple of seconds. Atheism has no boundaries. It has no set boundaries. So there's things that we learn in school, right, which are very negative, very bad. And I can say that objectively as a Christian because of what? The boundary, God's word, God's order, God's structure that governs my life, that I submit myself to, I yield to it, dictates for me. That doesn't mean there aren't ever times where I may be scratching my head like, Lord, why did this happen? Why did you say do this? Nobody's saying that. But at the same time, I say to myself, all this stuff makes sense objectively because of what you've set up, Lord. So I trust you to be the wise one to make all the decisions. And I'm going to follow you as the creator. But you think back through history, people can look back at history and say, well, Hitler, for example, that was evil. But objectively speaking, how can an atheist say what Hitler did was evil? Think about it. Objectively speaking, you can go through history and see people doing crazy things with atheist ideologies, atheist mindsets. And why did they do it? Because they believed that was right. But how did they believe this objectively? They didn't, and they couldn't. You see, whenever you see something happen in life, whenever you see something happen and you have that feeling inside like, that isn't right, that isn't fair. That is something which helps you see the big problem with atheism. This isn't like, I have no problem with atheists, right? In that sense, like, this is not to say atheists are these evil people or anything along those lines, right? This is not that. I'm engaging with the arguments, not the people. So the same way one week I'll deal with Islam or deal with Hebrew Israelites or deal with Rabbinic Judaism, it's not because I hate these individuals in these particular groups. It's actually the opposite, actually. But we're engaging with these arguments. We're looking at these things and trying to rationalize and reason with them and see, like, is this the best ideology, the best mindset to have? The reason we know this is not true, because think about this. Excuse me. In so many different areas in life, we want this option. And when I say this, I'm talking about atheists as well. So in many situations in life, the majority of people want an option like this. But when it comes to the big question, all of a sudden, they go the other way. Israel, what are you talking about? All right, let me give you some examples. So think about the country you live in right now. Think about the country you live in right now. What kind of country is it? Is it a country where anything goes? Or is it a country where there's rules and order? Think about that. Why do we want order? Why do we want it so that somebody cannot just enter your house when you're not there, take all of your things, and go about their business without anything happening to them? Why is it that we like that sort of thing? Because we like our stuff, yeah, that's true, but why else? What's the deeper thing beyond that? Because we know it isn't right. It's wrong to enter somebody's house without permission. This is not, for example, the police entering in a house and removing criminals or removing things along those lines. And we'll talk about the police in a moment. Why is that? We know why it is. Why is it that we say, let's talk about the Olympics, right? Since it just happened. Why is it recently? Why is it that in the Olympics, we don't just have the sprinters running with the marathon runners? We don't have the short distance runners with the long distance runners. Why is that we have that? Why don't we just put everyone together and say, okay, just run? Because we lack the order. We lack the long distance runners running 2 hours or however long it is, and we appreciate the fitness and the practice that goes into that. But we also like the sprinters who in and out, quick, 10 seconds or less. Well, 100 meters anyway, definitely under 10 seconds or you're not going to medal, most likely. You're not going to come first. Because we lack that order. These are the rules. What happens if, why is it that in a 100-meter race, for example, when they get down on the line and they get into position and they say, on your marks, get set, go. Why is it that if somebody takes off before somebody says go, the umpire says go, why is it that that person is disqualified or is given a false start? Because we know intuitively, we know if that person goes before the rules say, they're cheating. They're breaching the rules. It's not fair. But that's because we're so accustomed to an objective standard. But without the objective standard, we find ourselves in a position where what happens? Where one day, someone can turn around and say, well, no, I don't care about this. A few years back, a movie came out, which I talk about from time to time because it helps people understand this concept. This is why this was the other picture I mentioned at the start of the live stream. For those of you who know, this is a depiction from the movie The Purge. Now let me explain what happens in The Purge. In the movie The Purge, you have one day in the year where all laws are suspended. Any law that's in force is stopped. I was going to say you can break any law you want, but that's not even true because on that day there's no laws anymore. So it's not even breaking laws. You're just able to do whatever you like. So what do you think happens on that day? On that day, you have people going around, stealing, attacking, fighting, causing insurrection, evicting people from their houses, taking people's houses, assaulting people in the most grotesque ways, all of that stuff. And it's all fine. The day before, no, everybody's smiling, everybody's happy. But on Purge Day, the real person comes out. And on Purge Day, maybe somebody that looked at you a funny way 6 months ago, you're looking for that person on Purge Day. And you're like, well, I remember what they did to me that day. Today is the day I'm going to get them. But objectively speaking, what makes what happens on that Purge Day wrong? What makes it wrong? I don't like what happens on the Purge Day because I think it's wrong. Okay. We're all entitled to an opinion we have, but objectively speaking, what makes that wrong? What makes it wrong to assault a woman objectively? What makes it wrong to beat up, attack, and murder a young child? What makes any of those things objectively wrong? And this is the problem that continues to come up over and over and over again with atheism. This is why, even when some of the biggest atheists, the most popular atheists like Dr. Dawkins and people of those ilks, right, and levels of popularity, when they attack the Bible and say, oh, how could God command this? Or how could God allow this, etc.? It can always be reversed onto them for you to just ask them simply, by what standard objectively is that wrong? There's nothing you can say to me objectively which makes that wrong. Nothing. Christians believe in a God who reigns supreme. That means This isn't a democracy. We didn't vote God in and say, okay, yeah, God is the king. No, he is the king. That means he makes the rules. What he says goes. It doesn't mean you're going to like everything. The same way, for example, the countries we live in, no doubt have some, if not many, rules that you probably don't like. But because you don't like a rule from the government, whoever is who's leading and ruling the country you live in, doesn't mean they're not the people leading the government. So God makes the rules according to the Bible. God declares the rules, and God expects the people in his domain, which is the heavens and the earth, etc., the whole universe, whole of creation, to follow through with those rules. That's objective. God says it, he wants it done, we do it. But think about that same sort of framework under atheism. From one century, they will tell you this is acceptable. Then in the next century, they'll tell you this isn't acceptable. Then in the next century, they'll say it is acceptable again. And then no, it's not acceptable. And it is acceptable and it's not acceptable. And objectively speaking, they can't tell you why. But you're supposed to follow it. Yeah, but the majority of the people in the country say this is what they want. Okay, majority doesn't mean objective. The majority of people believing something or following something doesn't mean that it's objectively true or it's objective. It doesn't mean that. Because many people believe something doesn't make it an objective fact. This is why when you look through history, even when you think today, think about some of the conversations you have. And this is why it's such, in my opinion, a powerful conversational starter with an atheist. Because we all talk about stuff that's happening in the world, whether you watch the news or you don't. Like, we just live in a world today where news spreads all over the place. So yes, you can insulate yourself and not get too carried away or too caught up in all of this stuff. But if you have any sort of social life, friends and family, and someone's gonna, oh, did you see this? Did you, etc. Now, I'm not saying do this all the time, but imagine an atheist friend of yours, for example, or an atheist employee, an atheist boss, an atheist co-worker, starts talking to you about something like this. You don't have to bite their head off. You don't have to rub it in their face. But you could have a very cordial conversation about this sort of stuff. Like, I've been thinking about this recently, right? Like, I'm a Christian, you're an atheist, and like, I know why this thing that we're talking about now is very bad. And it's because for me as a Christian, the Bible says this is wrong, etc. But like, how do you, from your perspective, say this is objectively bad? How do you do that? Right? How do you do that? Look at this one, right? Even AI robots have morality because we program it that way. Now, imagine, this is making me think about iRobot, the movie, right, from a few years back. Imagine you create this robot or these sets of robots and you've programmed them to be, excuse me, as much like a human as possible. So humans will do this under these circumstances and they'll do that under those circumstances and they'll do all these different things under these circumstances. Imagine the robot who doesn't follow those orders, that doesn't follow that programming. What will happen to that robot? that robot would be decommissioned. Why? Because it's not following the rules. Imagine, right? And don't forget to hit the like button. I mentioned earlier, right? When we talk about these sorts of topics, it's easy for these topics to be swept under the rug and not promoted as much as they should be. So definitely do your part and help by hitting like and sharing this with people you know this will be a benefit to, right? Think about it. We want the robots to act and behave accordingly. But if a robot doesn't act accordingly, I think it was last year, right? I'm not going to mention that, but if a robot doesn't act accordingly, we say there's a problem. Notice this. Even, let's look at this comment, right? Ecosmere says, they do what? They deem depraved mind and wise scholar as both right, are both right, right? Depraved mind and wise scholar are both right. Now, think about it. When you don't have a solid ground, a solid foundation, I mentioned this before, you can say one thing is correct one day, you can say another thing is correct another day, and the crazy thing about it is you can say both are correct at the same time, and even both are wrong at the same time. You can make up the rules as you go. But imagine if, for example, in the country that you lived in, the police, who's supposed to protect and serve, to serve the people of the community, the country that they're working in. Imagine if the police had the power to do whatever they wanted. One day, or on, not even one day, on the same day, they could say on one occasion, I don't deem that as a crime. I'm going to let that person do that. Then they see another person doing the exact same thing and they say, you know what, but I'm going to deem that as a crime and I'm going to arrest that person. Imagine if you had police living in your city and they just decided whatever they were going to do. They decided what they were going to deem as a criminal offense and what they were going to say, well, we'll just let that pass. How successful do you think that community would be? Hey, Miss Sanders, hope you're doing well. Thanks for tuning in. Think about that question. Imagine you lived in a place where the police could do whatever they wanted. Unsuccessful, right? This is one way to think about the belief system of the atheist. This is one way to think about the belief system of the atheist. It wouldn't be successful. Chaos. Purge, right? And this is what's interesting. I don't know who made the purge, but it's a powerful example of the problem with atheism. So anybody who's ever watched the movie The Purge, there's two ways for you to think about that movie as you watch it when it's Purge Day. It's either this is wicked and this is crazy, or yeah, I want this. I would love that. And it's crazy because I don't think a lot of atheists think about that when they're watching it. But any atheist who watches a movie like The Purge, for example, and is like, no, this is crazy. We shouldn't live like this. this is madness, is going against their own internal belief system, whether they knew it or not. Total chaos. Could you imagine if tomorrow morning you went to bed tonight, you didn't dream of the purge tonight, but you went to bed tonight, right? You open your door tomorrow morning to look at the sun and to get the rays on your eyes, etc. And you see someone like that standing outside your door. Imagine that. Imagine though, you close your door, you pull your phone out of your pocket, you dial 999, 911, right? Whatever the number is, wherever you are, wherever you live, right? To call the emergency. You put your phone to your ear and you say, emergency services, I need the police. There's a man standing outside my house with this crazy looking mask on, and he's got black gloves on, and he's got a black leather jacket on, and he's with friends. You need to come and arrest them now, because it looks like they're trying to do something crazy. Imagine the person on the other side of the phone says, no, we're going to let them do what they're doing today. We would all intuitively know this is a problem. This is the same intuition we have, the same feeling we have when we start reading the Bible, read Genesis 1, we read about creation, we get to Genesis 2 and we hear God say to Adam, don't eat from that tree. And then we get to Genesis chapter 3, where we see the fall of man, and we see Adam and Eve eat from that fruit, from that tree. And then we're just like, wow, they really did it. They really ate from the fruit from the fruit tree that God told them not to. And then the punishment comes. The judgment comes. That was objectively wrong. Because in that system, God said it was wrong. But in an atheistic worldview, in an atheistic system, that can be wrong one day, then it can be right the next day. You could have a feeling from moment to moment. You could have a feeling from year to year, month to month, decade to decade. This is the sort of chaos, purge-like system more and more people are experiencing today in different parts of the world. And this is why some of the comments I highlighted earlier and showed them and highlighted them are true. Right? People are seeing all this evil, and it's getting to the point now where they can't totally just, oh yeah, there is evil, without actually thinking, no, there's actually good here. There's actually good in the world. Those people like Christians out there who are saying, no, we need to fix up, we need to change. They actually have some truth. There's something there to what they're actually saying. This is the problem. So whenever you engage with an atheist, this doesn't need to be like, you don't have to lead with this. You don't have to, like I said earlier, beat them over the head with this. But just understand, this is a big problem in that sort of worldview, without any objective truth, without any objective morality, without any objective right and wrong. Anybody can tell you on any given day, don't do that, that was wrong. Do this, this was right. But without an objective structure, without an objective boundary, there's no way you can turn around and say, this was wrong or this was right. All we are getting at best is someone's opinion or a group of people's opinion. But in that worldview, in that framework, that really doesn't mean much. You see, it sounds crazy what I'm going to say, but we live in a world today. It's always been like this, but it is what it is. We live in a world today where you could be told at some point in the future, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 equals 15. 1 + 1 equals 20. 1 + 1 equals 7. 1 + 1 equals whatever I desire it to equal. And I said already, some people will think, no, that's crazy. But isn't it crazy that people today say what? A man says, no, he feels like a woman. He's a woman. And a woman says, she feels like a man. She's a man. How crazy would that have been if someone was saying that to you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? It's not because nobody ever didn't say it before then, but because these things are happening and being broadcast all over in an instant. You're going to get to a point in time where older people who have a depraved, degraded, reprobate mind and are attracted to younger people are going to turn around and start saying, we're just like those people. They're just like those people who were born with the wrong body. They're going to turn around and start saying they're born with the wrong. They were born with the wrong age. They're not really 50 years old. They're 5 years old. They identify as a 5-year-old. So this 5-year-old, it's not a 45-year age difference. It's not a 50-year age difference. They're the same age. We're the same age. That's what they're going to say. Now, from a biblical Christian perspective, we can say categorically, objectively, that is depraved. It's reprobate. It's dodgy. But from an atheist perspective, they cannot objectively say this. This is why anybody who, when I started saying this in the beginning, made me thinking, oh no, that is crazy. That will never happen. How can you objectively say that? You can't. There's things, if you go back far enough in time, and when I mean far enough in time, we could even talk 5 years, 10 years, stuff like that, where if you look hard enough, you can probably find some prominent atheists arguing against certain things. And then as time has changed, a couple of years have gone past, they've now softened up, or they've now gone to the opposite side and said, oh, you know what, yeah, etc. You see, Christians cannot do that with certain things. Yes, we can all change our minds. We can go from a position of error to truth. That's the transition we want to be making more and more every single day. You can go from a position of, oh, you know what, I thought this before, now I think something different. We can all change our minds, right? But there's certain things which are objectively true, or are objectively just are. They objectively are just this way. But that only makes sense objectively in an environment where there's a boundary, where there's borders, where there's a line in the sand which says this is this side and this is this side. But in atheism, it's like this. Every day in atheism is like purge day. When you really whittle it down to its bare basics, that's what it is. It may not always look like that or seem like that, but this is what it is. Ecosmere says they call themselves minor attracted persons. You see? I was reading in this book, right? I did a video about this on my other channel recently. Very powerful book. Working the Angles by Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson is the guy who made the Message Bible. So, you know, the Bible that the translation that likes to exaggerate verses. Not the Amplified, the Message. That same person who made that translation made this book, Working the Angles. And in this book, he talks about one of the ways the enemy does things. He talks about how, and he quotes to set up this whole part in his book, C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, his book, The Screwtape Letters, which is also a really good book to read as well. But I was reading this book maybe like a year ago, and he's talking about how the enemy, how you destroy words. He's like, you destroy a word by associating negative things with it over and over and over again. So when you do that for long enough, you now have a warped negative view of it, and then you move away from it, and then they own that word. So for example, let me give you an example of how this looks. So we talked about Genesis 2 and 3 earlier, right? With the fall of man, as we call it. You get to Genesis 6, what do we have? We have the flood, where God decides, based on his ecosystem, his boundaries, that it's time to wipe out the whole world with a flood. So you read about the flood narrative in Genesis 6, 7, 8, and 9. In Genesis 9, Noah comes out of the ark with his 3 sons, with his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. So 8 of them. And the first thing the Bible tells us Noah does is he makes a sacrifice. And we read about how God puts this bow in the cloud as a promise that he would never do that again. The rainbow, right? Now, for serious Bible students, when we think about the rainbow, we think about, what do we think about? We think about God's promise, God's integrity to his word, that he will never break his word, that he will never flood the world again the way he did before. But like Peterson talks about in his book, what does he say? He says they will start associating certain things which are negative. So now you know why the alphabet community, as I like to call them, are so hell-bent on portraying a certain image to you. Why? Because that is how you rob good and try and slip in evil. You take an image or a word and then you swap it out for something different. So now, most children who think about the rainbow or think about an array of colors like that, what do they think about? Should I go deeper? Let's stay on the same topic, but just segue to the side, pivot a little bit, right? For those of us who enjoy reading our King James Bibles, King James Bibles, right? Translations in the English language. In the book of James, in chapter 2, as an example, right? James says, hey, look, don't be a respecter of persons. There's a boundary again that God gives. Like, don't show favoritism. Don't be a respecter of person. He says, if a guy comes into your assembly and he's wearing gay clothing, don't treat him better than somebody who isn't wearing nice and good clothes. Why? James isn't saying don't treat some guy who comes in to the assembly like somebody from Sodom. No, that's not what James is saying. Don't think their persons are sodomite. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying don't treat that person like they're wearing homosexual clothing or anything like that. No, that's not what he's saying. Why? Because not too long ago, the word gay meant happy. But when you think about that word today, what does it make you think about? What are the connotations associated with that word? Similar example, you can see what's happening, can't you? You could do this over and over and over again, and you'll see over and over and over again, these words and these concepts are used one way, then it's almost like they're just flipped on their head and they're changed and it means something different. Now, look at this, for example, right? I'm not going to make too many assumptions here, but I just saw this comment, right? Smack Dad, welcome to the live stream. Thanks for tuning in. He comes with a question. He asks, where did it go? Why is it not showing? Let's try this again. All right. He says, what does the Bible say should be done with homosexual people? Now, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Regardless of what the Bible says, right? Because that isn't necessarily the topic of today's live stream, is it? But we all know as Christians, the Bible says things should be done. There's judgment. There's rulings from as early as Genesis chapter 2 about what should be done to people who go against God's word. Different rulings, different judgments, or different stuff. And we can say and believe that as objectively true, as objectively right, because that's the ecosystem we live under. It's objective. But it's interesting that that's the actual question, because look back through history, right? When you look back through history, the mindset and the behavior has changed. So SmackDab says, I know what it says. I assume you know what it says. And if you know what it says, why are you asking me what it says? Nobody's running from what it says. But notice, this is an example of what I was talking about earlier. You can take the worst thing you can think of in the Bible, anybody, right? Obviously today's topic is about from an atheism. So an atheist, for example, can take whatever they think is the worst thing in the Bible. They don't like that God told Adam and Eve not to eat of the fruit. They could take that, for example. They could take God sanctioning a war. They could take God wiping out the world by a flood. They could, whatever they deem as, oh, you know what? That was really bad. But objectively speaking, what makes it wrong? Objectively speaking, God makes the rules. Whatever he says goes. Imagine you're in your house, right? Group of people come to your house and they start doing stuff you don't like, and you say to them, look, don't do that. I don't like that being done in my house. Those people that came to your house, even if they're your friends, could look at you and be like, I hate that rule. That doesn't change the fact that that rule is going to be, that rule is the rule in the house because that's your house. It doesn't make a difference how the people in the house who have come to the house have found themselves in the house. It doesn't make a difference. They can like it, they cannot like it. That's up to them. But it doesn't change the fact that you've made that rule in that house. There's nobody who's going to turn around and say, yeah, you know what, in my house, yeah, I make rules in my house, but I don't want them to be followed. I want someone to just totally go against all the rules I made in my house. All right. People in certain countries finally don't have to live in fear of being executed, at least for now. In certain countries, they still executed by religious fanatics. Okay. So, in certain countries, there's religious fanatics who execute people for certain behaviors or for doing certain crimes. In America, for example, right? I wouldn't call an American a religious fanatic for executing people with the death penalty. You don't have to agree with the death penalty, with capital punishment, the death penalty or not. You don't have to agree with it or not, but if in America, for example, in certain states, they kill people for certain actions, i.e. murder, i.e. some just different behaviors, whatever they are, I wouldn't necessarily say an American government is religiously fanatic. I would say, well, those are the rules that they've set up. And the truth is, an atheist in America, for example, objectively speaking, cannot speak against America and say capital punishment is objectively wrong. They can't. They can't do it. They can give their opinion, of course. Oh, you know what? I don't think this is right. I don't believe we should be doing this. But why don't you believe it? Because it's wrong. Why is it wrong? You see? An American could even say, imagine if you had this atheist, right? I don't know if Smack Dab's an atheist or not, but let's just put what Smack Dab says on the lips of an atheist. An atheist comes to America and says, how dare you kill someone by capital punishment for them committing that crime in this country? You're a religious fanatic. Or you're a national fanatic. You're a patriotic fanatic. And the person turns around and says, like, objectively speaking, how am I a patriotic fanatic? How am I a religious fanatic? How am I a fanatic in any way? And also, who even says that being a fanatic is negative or bad or wrong? Objectively speaking, that is. And that person will be waiting for an answer for a lifetime. Right? They'll be waiting for an answer for a lifetime. And that is the problem with atheism. That is the problem with atheism. Why can see, let's use this for example, right? We spoke about this a little bit earlier, right? the demented people today, the people that need mental assistance, who call themselves minor attracted persons. Go to an atheist and ask them, why are minor attracted people wrong? Or what they believe. Even if you think about it like this, right? Even if you went like, again, I don't know if Smack Dab's an atheist, right? But let's say Smack Dab was an atheist, for example. Imagine if I asked Smack Dab and I said, hey Smack Dab, and I said, I know this guy, right? He's like 50 years old. And he's a MAP. He's on the map. And he says he knows he's 50 according to these laws, but these laws also say in the land that he lives in that he can identify as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. He identifies as a 6-year-old, and there's a 6-year-old he wants to marry. So he's planning to actually marry this 6-year-old, and he's looking forward to all the stuff that comes along with marriage. What do you think about that? Now, most of us who are objective, most of us thinking about this with even a little bit of sanity, can imagine and envision how many people, how Smack Dab would react, for this example, obviously. And many other people and many other atheists, right? Think about all the atheists in the world. Many people who hear that will be like, are you crazy? And many more people, and this is how we know. Imagine now if that 6-year-old was many of those atheists' younger sister or a daughter. How do you think they would react? How do you think they would engage hearing that sort of story? That individual who's on the map is looking forward to marrying your younger sister or your younger daughter. How do you think they would react? They will turn around in more cases than not and take that person off the map. I'll just put it like that. But let's just go one step further and think about that for a second though. As an atheist, under atheism, how is that objectively wrong? And the answer to that question is why we are seeing some of the stuff we're seeing today in different parts of the world. Imagine this. Imagine, Smack Dab mentioned earlier, right? People in certain parts of the world are now free to do certain things because they're not afraid of anything anymore. Imagine in the West specifically, right? We live in a time period today where, as we talked about previously, the atheistic worldview objectively is like shifting sand. There's no objective, firm foundation for anything. And when you live under that sort of society, when you live under that sort of ideology, that framework, that belief system, we talked about this before. This is where objectivity doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It matters as much as you desire it to matter, and doesn't as much as you don't desire it to matter, whenever you like and however you like, right? So we talked earlier about a time period today where it's being so heavily promoted across the board that a man can wake up today and say he feels like he's not a man anymore. He actually feels like a woman. And instead of getting that individual the help that they need, they assist them to go down that pathway. That is the same illogical, unobjective, shape-shifting belief structure that tells you we can say someone who's living isn't actually living, isn't alive. So this is why it was interesting to me when Smack Dab was saying, oh, you know what, we live in a time period now where some people in some places don't have to fear for their life anymore because they can freely do as they please. We're not talking about not being able to freely do as you please. But when you can say life isn't life, right? When you say life isn't actually life, what happens? You find yourself in a situation like we have today where 50 million, that was the last time I checked, 50 million not lives, not living things, not living people are made not living. How do you end a life that isn't a life? That doesn't make sense. Objectively speaking, that doesn't make sense. But that makes sense under an atheistic worldview, where you can say there's a life in the womb, but it's not really life because we say it's not life. Right? Okay, so look at this, right? I don't know who censored this question, but Smack Dab says his question was censored. He says, let him try again. He's asking me outright, do I think people should be wiped off the map? That's in allusion to my example earlier, right? About the people on the map, as I said. Let's say, for example, I said yes to this question. That's not the answer. That's not my answer to this question. And you'll never find me anywhere saying anything like that, right? Why? Because that is not the system I live under. So God makes the rules in my life system, not me. But let's say, for example, just for sake of this question, right? This thought process, that imagine I said yes. Imagine you walk in, you find someone. Imagine Smack Dab's searching around and he finds someone and he's asking this question and someone says yes. So what? Objectively speaking, from an atheist perspective, what would be a problem with that? And that is the problem, again, with atheism. The very big problem. That is, again, the problem with atheism. Because half of the atheists in the world will say, and half of the atheists in the world can say, yeah, they should be wiped off the map. The other half should say no. Now, for anybody who wasn't paying attention or who missed it or didn't realize, I actually answered this question earlier on in the live stream. When I said what? There's some people today who, for one example, are men, but wake up and say, oh, you know what, they feel like they're women. And what did I say should happen to those people? Those people should be helped. They should be assisted. What do you do when you have somebody who believes things which are totally irrational? Believes things which we know are objectively false? What do? We help those people come back to the truth. At least that's what we should do. Now, I'm saying that, and I'm saying that objectively as a Christian. Why? Because the Christian who follows his Bible knows over and over and over again that what? We are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. So what does that mean? Let's say, for example, I had some very erroneous, some very crazy, illogical, irrational, unobjective beliefs. What would I desire somebody to do for me? I would desire that person to help me. So what would I do in that situation? Help. It may not seem like this for all atheists, but I know this live stream, for example, is not only going to help Christians who watch this live stream live and on the replay, but this live stream is also going to help many atheists in the now and also in the future who think rationally through what I'm saying. Why would I do this? Why would I do this, for example, instead of wiping atheists off the map? Because I love them. Because I want them to be objective. Because when you're objective, it's better for you. And we know this. We don't want shape-shifting police officers. We don't want shape-shifting governments. We don't want shape-shifting people in these situations. And that's the difference. All these things we're talking about today, I can say them and believe them objectively because the God that I follow gives me objective rules and guidelines to follow. But an atheist can't say that. An atheist can't say objectively, no, don't wipe people off the map. This is why atheist systems don't work for the long term. All right, look at this, right? If we somehow discovered no God exists, would you still be able to reason your way to know God, to God being wrong, to God is wrong? I guess I don't even know what that's supposed to be saying, that last part. See, this is the interesting thing about that question, because especially for a Christian, right? Let me speak from a Christian perspective. And this is something I've taken for granted for a long time, but in recent years I've started to realize I need to stop taking this for granted. So in the Christian framework, God presents himself as a God of truth. And what that actually means from a perspective of people who follow God is that we are to follow truth. The Bible says, for example, several times that God is a God who cannot lie. So we're not to be liars. If we lie, for example, that's us going against what God desires, what God wants. We are to pursue truth. So again, let's say God didn't exist and somebody believed truly in their heart they're pursuing truth and they believe God doesn't exist. It's funny because I pretty much started the live stream like that, talking about something very similar to this. But let's go a bit deeper and think about this. Let's say, for example, someone who believes in God, but they start thinking God doesn't exist. And they say, well, I don't believe the way I used to, but I'm just going to keep living that way. I'm going to keep living like God is real. It wouldn't matter. Think about this. We can think about all these different examples, all these different areas in life, and we'll keep coming to the same conclusion. This is why it doesn't matter. And this is why I mentioned earlier, right? We can go to any example in the Bible, and it's different for different people, right? Different things rub different people more than others. So, let me give you an example, right? So, one of the strongest objections to theism, belief in God, I would say typically that I've seen, is the question of evil. If God is real, how comes there's so much evil in the world, etc.? Now, personally, that argument has never really been that strong for me. It hasn't. Like, I'll just be honest, it really hasn't. That has never really been a major argument for me against God. Why? Because, well, we spoke about this earlier, right? Genesis chapter 2, Genesis chapter 3. Whenever I think about why there's evil in the world, I think back to what the Bible tells us about why is there evil. Why? Because that's the system that I believe to be true. So the Bible talks about evil with sin. So if there is sin, and if there's sin and more sin, we see more evil. Sin is a corruption. It corrupts, etc. But also at the same time, I also think to myself about stuff like what I've spoken about today. If there's all this evil, why is it even evil? Why is it evil? If God doesn't exist, evil is just an invention that we've made that someone can turn around tomorrow, as happens over and over again through history. With people who believe that way. This was evil. No, this was evil. No, that's evil. No, this is evil. No, that's evil. You're evil. You're evil. Tag your it. Tag your it. Tag your it. It's a construction that is arbitrarily given out. We can just say that's evil and then that's evil, but it's not objective. Objective morality only comes from an objective lawgiver, an objective lawmaker, who can say this is right and this is wrong. This is right and this is wrong. That's the only way it works. So, if God is real and God expects good to happen, but God isn't programming everybody to only do good, then you would expect evil to be present as well. But if there's nobody who's objectively saying good is good and evil is evil, then nothing is really evil and nothing is really good. Those are just abstract labels which have been made for whatever purpose. Notice this though, right? I could continue going on for hours and hours. We could look at example after example after example. We'll keep coming back to the same thing. There are things in the Bible which are hard to read sometimes, hard to understand, hard to grasp. But you know what? Under that framework of Bible believer, Bible reader, those things are analyzed within that system, that world system. And how does the Bible start? It starts by telling us, in the beginning, God, right? God was there in the beginning. God is the one who created everything. The moment we remove God from that equation and we just leave people, then nothing we read in the Bible or in any book or in any place or see for that matter is objectively good or bad. So the fact that we can read in the Bible certain times things which we may not personally like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? The fact we can actually do that is because we believe in something objective, which is telling us, okay, you can see this or see that, and is this wrong? Is that wrong? If God makes these rules, if God makes these particular structures, what he says goes. Okay, so that makes sense of everything. You can have a row of items and then you can have something on top which holds all those items together. So the overarching principle is that God is supreme and he reigns supreme and he makes the rules in his kingdom. That governs everything else underneath. The moment you take God out of the equation, the moment you take this thing out and remove it, you just have stuff. But there's nothing being held up. That's why everything falls down or nothing can be built up. And this is why I say atheism, that worldview, is a shape-shifting worldview. It's a sinking sand worldview because you can't do anything with it objectively. You could build this large tower and it would I was going to say, and it would fall down immediately, but you couldn't even build it. You could proclaim that you built this large and illustrious tower, but anybody who's objectively looking at it would know it never got off the ground because there's no foundation to hold it up. The big problem with atheism is there's no objective morality. There's no objective thing that says this is right, this is wrong. And this is the big problem we see all the way throughout our lives, because we look at things and we love objective morality in most, if not everything that we do. And this is the big problem with atheism. This is why we still don't know. Well, I don't know. Maybe he mentioned it in the comment if Smack Dab is actually an atheist, right? Still don't know if he is or not, or she is or not. No matter what Smack Dab or anybody can say about something they don't like in the Bible, why don't you like it objectively? It defeats every moral question that they can present. Because they're borrowing, or as Dr. Frank Turek says, stealing from God, robbing God to try and make an argument. God did this thing and I think it's evil. But if God makes the rules and he says it's not evil, or if God is ruling supreme over everything and can do what he sees fit and what he determines is just, then you can't actually do that. God is actually doing what he says. The same way you drive your car or you buy the car you desire to buy. The same way you go to the supermarket and you buy the stuff you want to buy. You pick up the stuff you want to buy in the supermarket. You read the books you desire to read. The same way we all make these decisions ourselves. And we don't want people encroaching on us and saying, no, I don't want you to eat that breakfast. You eat the breakfast I'm going to give you, etc. We don't like that. So somehow we're supposed to turn to God and say, God, like, what are you doing? Do it this way, do it that way. That only works in a framework where you're your own God and you can make your own rules. And that's what atheism is, in a nutshell. When you whittle it down and rub away and wipe away all of the illusion of a tall, glorious building, just like the New Atheists did in the early 2000s, and you look at it and you realize they didn't even ever get off the ground. So nobody wanted to call in today. That's fine. But I know this session was a blessing to many of you who are watching live and many who are watching on the replay. So if you haven't already, definitely like this stream, hit the like button, because let's just say I'm not going to be surprised if this isn't pushed out and promoted to more people. And also you can help avoid that happening by sharing this with someone you know this will be a blessing to. It doesn't have to be a Christian, it can be an atheist, it doesn't matter, but share this, be led. And I pray this live stream was a blessing to you. And by God's grace, I'll see you next time on the Sunday Roast. Take care. We had a lot of protein today. I need to help digest that with this wonderful fruit smoothie. God bless.